probably in the end it reflected desires for the Scottish people. I think it would have been dangerous to fight it forever. But I think at the same time, Scotland and England can be independent and confident, and Scotland is more independent in the Union than it would be without it.
Would you be in favour of further devolution, since there seems to be still an appetite for it?
Scotland Act is good. I think giving more taxation powers is good. But I think Scotland needs to... I'm half Scottish, half English, like many people in this country. I think it's a reckless and unnecessary thing to rip us apart.
People aren't going to stop breeding if the two countries separate. I mean, it's perfectly possible.
Of course it is. All of this is possible, Jeremy. All of this can be done if you want to do it. It's not going to be the cataclysm or the end of the world. It would just be a crying shame and something that we'd all lose by.
What about an English Parliament?
You want an English Parliament? Go ahead. This is about national identity.
Why has the English been discriminated against when it's the largest of the four countries and the other three all got their own assembly?
I think,
or
to be
parliament?
honest, you're falling into the trap that the Scottish nationalists are setting you. They're trying to make you feel that you're discriminated against. Everything that they're doing is designed to try to make you feel resentful. You don't need to be.
Not resentful.
You can be confident and proud of being British.
I want what they've got. That's not resentful.
You're turning this into a mini competition.
Do you think the English are discriminated against?
Absolutely not. In fact, the lady on the film was slightly disingenuous, lady from KPMG with her figures, because Scotland actually puts more into the UK exchequer.
I'm not talking about the economy. I'm talking about the fact that the Scots have got a parliament, the Welsh have got an assembly, the Northern Irish have got an assembly.
Well, the Scots, the vast majority of Scottish people in every opinion poll have said that they want full economic power, they want job-creating power for their parliament, and all that power is with London. Now, if the coalition government was serious about having respect for Scotland, they would give us a Scotland Act that allowed us the levers over our own economy.
Let's hear from one or two English people in the audience. Do you think, do you feel discriminated against?
Say so at all. I've never felt discriminated as English.
Supposing that the Scots do decide that they are going to have a referendum on independence, do you think the English should also be allowed a voice?
I think so. I think it's natural.
But they couldn't force the Scots to stay if there were a majority in England who said, you know, we don't want it, and the Scots said, we do want it.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, sorry?
Yeah, go on. What about anyone else here think that... Go on, you say.
You know, if you hear some of the poll results that were talked about in that video, the way things are going over time, you've got even, you know, the amount of English people that are saying Scotland should get on and do their own thing is actually increasing, whereas you ask the Scots and they'll be inclined to say, well, actually no, independence, that's maybe a little bit too far. I'll vote for SNP, but I don't want to be an independent country.
Are there Scots here who feel that the English are discriminated against, or the English should have a say?
No, I don't think the English should have a say, because this is a purely Scottish matter. I don't think life will change.
Between two countries, don't the two have a say?
Not really. I don't think life will change too much for the English. I mean, they'll lose a few Labour MPs, probably a good thing for Rory and his party. And I don't think life will change too much. They'll still, you know, still be run by Westminster. Everybody will be happy, and you know, I think the Scots and English can get on. We get on well just now anyway, with the kind of pseudo-independence that we've got just now. So, what would change?
That point is actually very typical of many English people too, who clearly aren't that fussed about it.
Yeah, I think it's true that we do get on well, and it's been a very, very difficult period learning to get on well. We didn't get on well before we had a union. We're in danger of turning friends into competitors, and we're in danger of opening up rivalries and crises of identities that none of us need or want and aren't going to benefit us.
I don't agree with that at all, Rory. I mean, the British Empire, we used to have Canada, Australia, Ireland. We've still got great contacts and connections with them, family ties, social ties, economic ties. What's different
You've
about
obviously not been at
Scotland?
Murrayfield when there's an England team playing.
I come from a Scottish family. My father is very proud to be Scottish. He lives in Scotland, lives in Crieff, and he's very proud to be British. And that represents, I think, more people in Scotland than you represent, and I don't think you speak for Scotland when you say that.
I want to ask you about a few institutions. You've already mentioned the monarchy. You want to keep the Queen, don't you?
That's
so to be
correct,
Queen,
yes.
as presumably in the way that Australia or Canada keep the Queen as head of state. What about the army? What would happen to the army?
Well, the army is already, the army markets itself for recruiting purposes as a Scottish army. Scotland doesn't actually have a great deal of union dividend from the army. Our defence spending has been cut by 36%.
Would you expect to take control of the Scottish regiments in the army?
Yes, of course we would.
Right, and they would then be sent into action by Alex Salmond or
Not
whoever.
into illegal wars.
Fine.
That's one of the reasons we want independence.
What you deem to be legal wars, but
See, the thing,
they would
the thing
be
is,
under
Jeremy,
a separate command.
they would be under a separate command, of course.
Yeah.
But you
What
can
about
enter
Scottish
into
banks? Would you like those back
collaborations.
too?
Scottish banks?
Yes, the ones that have been bailed out by British taxpayers.
Well, the Scottish banks are cost 66 billion to bail out. Scottish GDP at that time was 145 billion. Scotland
So
is
you would
very
like them
well
back?
able to bail out its own
Okay,
banks.
go on, sir.
Potentially, if you took the English bankers out of the Scottish banks, they'd be in a better shape.
Cheap point. Now, supposing this happens and seems quite probable now, what do you think would be the consequences for England in your ideal world?
In my ideal world, we'll get our own parliament, which we've not had now since devolution started. They rule themselves, the Welsh do, the Irish do. We're ruled by Scots, Welsh, Irish and Europeans. The cradle of democracy has lost its democracy in the House of Commons. So we would get the ability to rule ourselves back, and I also think we'd be able at that point to get out of the European Union, because most of the support for it comes from the Scots and the Welsh.
Okay, so yes, go on.
I think Westminster has got itself into a serious muddle, and I think I'd ask you to consider this, Rory, that the fact that Scottish MPs can vote on English matters is clearly completely wrong.
Exactly.
Under the Westminster model. And that's a model that, as an Australian, it just seems bizarre and
Absolutely.
completely eccentric that an English have allowed their wonderful Westminster model of Parliament to be completely...
But this is just a constitutional... Well, go on. You can
No,
answer
I mean, I
yourself.
think you've got a point there, and I think there are big problems. But there's a much bigger game here. And I'm afraid what's happening is we're coming in on ourselves. We're becoming very narrow-minded here. There are big things that the Union have given us over 300 years and will continue to give us. England produces the Industrial Revolution, Scotland produces the Scottish Enlightenment. Who knows what happens the next 200 years? And yes, there are a lot of adjustments we're going to have to make this day. But I'm sure in the world we're facing, it's going to be better to be a bigger, more confident country.
You know, this
and not
just
fall
isn't
in on
borne out
ourselves.
by the facts. If you look at the Legatum Prosperity Index, which judges countries not only in their economy but in well-being and health, the countries at the top of that Prosperity Index are Norway, Finland, Denmark, Australia, New Zealand. The supranational states like the UK and the US are far down. The UK is a very unequal country. It's got one of the highest levels of inequality in Europe.
Yep.
And in Scotland, under devolution, we've been trying to move away from that and create a fairer society, and moving to independence will be allowing us to go further down that road.
Let's move. I want to move on, if I may, because political entities in the end, or do I mean in the beginning, are built on a shared sense of purpose and identity. If, as has been suggested, the purpose is now wobbly, what of the identity? North of the border, the nationalists are busy affirming a Scottish identity, but do the English have any comparable sense to set against or alongside it? Fergal Keane isn't English, he's a professional Irishman, in fact, so we asked him to look at the whole question of what being English means now.
This is the landscape of an imagined England, the heartland of the Anglo-Saxons. And from this land of marsh and wood came a man we might call the father of English nationalism, Hereward the Wake, celebrated here in Victorian art as the essence of English martial vigour. Never mind, he had at least partly Danish roots.
Hereward the Wake harried the Norman conquerors. He struck and then vanished again into this fenland wilderness. Later generations of writers would mythologize him as the symbol of defiant England.
But it was English pragmatism that really triumphed, accepting Norman rule and ultimately building the world's mightiest empire. A nation founded on the pillars of monarchy, church and parliament. In Shakespeare's words, an England that never did lie at the proud foot of a conqueror. And that stability is really part of the problem for English nationalism. For nationalism to thrive and become a mass movement, it needs an existential threat. The Scots, the Irish and the Welsh had all-conquering England as the malign colossus against which they could define their national identities. But the English haven't had a conqueror on their own soil in over 1,000 years. Englishness became the dominant identity of the British imperial project. Here in the fenland town of March, as in so much of the rest of England, Englishness and Britishness are hard to disentangle.
I mean, you have different sorts of English people talk about in the country, from Yorkshire, from Wales, and different sorts of accents, but really altogether, it's just one big group of people.
I'm English, British, I don't care, I'm happy.
I've always welcomed, you know, the concept of Britain, if you like, with Scotland, Wales and Ireland. But they don't seem to be too happy, some of them, about being part of the Union, which is fine by me.
Does it make you resent the Scots?
Not at all, not at all. As long as they've got a passport to come down here when they want to visit. We'll let them in.
Well, we're not going to stand for that. You can't push English people around like sacks of potatoes. English?
Don't you come that stuff, Jim Garland. We always were English and we always will be English.
Henry Cornelius's 1940s classic Passport to Pimlico celebrates an English identity untouched by the insecurities that can afflict the conquered or the colonised.
What's the idea of holding us up like this? I got my dinner to cook.
Don't blame me.
But in this age of departing certainties, how should England respond to Scots nationalism?
I'm in no doubt that you cannot stand in the way of a distinct people with a distinct national identity who wish through constitutional change to express that identity. And the English have to realise that. The English need to think about the need, the democratic need, for an English Parliament. And I hope I live and see the day when the flag of St George is flying over the Victoria Tower at Westminster.
Throughout modern history, England's political mainstream has committed itself to union. Now the task of articulating a definitively English response to the fraying of the Union is largely taking place outside politics. Here at Newcastle, the Scots once laid siege to the city after taking up arms against the king.
Within 50 years of that siege, the two nations were bound together in an act of union which endures still. In many ways, this city came to symbolise a British working class experience shared with men on the Clyde further north, with shipbuilders in Belfast, coal miners in Wales. I've come to Newcastle to see if the changes in Scotland might lead to a reawakening of an English nationalism in those who up to now were happy to call themselves British.
This region has always had a very delicate relationship with Scotland. You know, this region is covered in castles which were built to defend it against Scotland. I'm not sure, though, that people in Northumbria are particularly more Northumbrian now because of the existence of Scottish nationalism. I think there's a more general English awakening in the face of these new nationalisms within Britain.
In as much as it's possible to say, what does Englishness mean to people here now?
I don't think it has the kind of intensity of a Welsh or a Scottish or an Irish nationalism or national identity, but I think it's about some core values that people believe are inherently English. It could be things like fair play, things like individualism or liberty, about being decent. You know, it's the local or working class or ordinary person's view of those values which we see as, well, other people in the world see as timeless, as being connected to England and Britain.
As an outsider, I've always been struck by the essential pragmatism and moderation of the English. In the words of that most questioning of Englishmen, George Orwell, a people for whom the hymn of hate had no attraction.
Asserting and confronting is distinctly not English qualities, they're not Anglican qualities actually. Ironically enough, you know, it's that ironic understatement that really characterises what Englishness should be. So how do you go about doing that?